Hi, welcome to another edition of the Alan Rosenberg Show. Little impromptu video, and this is Wishbone, my puppy baby. And Wishbone just had surgery, so we've been keeping him company this week, and he's got some recovery to do with his little donut on him. So, quick video because I just heard that Tom Verlaine of television passed away. And as we're all kind of saying, our rock stars are dropping like flies. This one a little bit more surprising in the sense that, I always think of like the punk rockers as not as old. I think of like the legendary rockers from the 60s and older, are the really old people that are going to be passing away and are. Verlaine and television are like from 77, 78. But surprisingly, yeah, he was like 73 years old, I believe he was. So, television, critically acclaimed band. Here's their three albums. I'm definitely a fan. Their first album, the legendary album Marquee Moon, which came out in 77. These are great, by the way. These are digitally remastered from Elektra and Rhino, and they put bonus tracks on, and they're really nicely done. They open up like gatefold, but then it gatefolds again, and has really thick booklets in here. And of course, you got television. Here's the booklet. Led by Tom Verlaine, the main songwriter and the guitarist, but you got Richard Lloyd, co-guitarist, and Fred Smith on bass, and the drummer, which was, Billy Fica. Really good band, really unique. I understand why they didn't really make it in the United States. These two albums didn't even chart in the United States in the top 200, which is pretty amazing considering how famous, especially Marquee Moon is. Didn't even chart. In the UK, they did well. I remember they had opened up for Blondie in 77 in the UK. Blondie was a big band, bigger over in the UK than in America, and they bombed as the opening band. They did not do well. Apparently, they didn't have a lot of stage presence. But what makes television unique out of those punk rock bands is the guitar work. Verlaine and Richard Lloyd are both fine guitarists, and instead of having those punk rock 3-minute songs, a lot of times they would go off and just jam. The title track, of course, Marquee Moon, and you need this version to hear the full version. It's like over 10 minutes long. They cut it on the vinyl because they couldn't fit it. It goes on and on. Fine guitar work. He's certainly not a shredder. If you listen to their solos, it's like single notes solos, but it's tasty and melodic. And they're a really good band. This was the first album, the classic Marquee Moon, and See No Evil, Venus. He sings Venus de Milo, Venus de Milo. He says Friction, great song. Of course, the classic title track with the extended guitar work. Elevation, Prove It, Guiding Light, Torn Curtain. They're tasty. I haven't heard this in a while. I remember in Prove It, there's a point where Billy Fica, the drummer, he does like a nice little fill on the hi-hat and then goes to the snare drum and does like a nice close roll and hits a crash. Just stuff that you wouldn't really expect in that punk rock sound. They were more musical than your typical punk rock band that was playing CBGBs, and they were playing CBGBs, so they kind of stood out. I think possibly this album didn't make it commercially, in the Billboard Top 200, strictly because his vocals are an acquired taste. Tom Verlaine, his vocals are idiosyncratic, to say the least. It's a little bit shrill. It's an acquired taste, I think. And, the band is just a different kind of a band. But that's what makes it great. I love, it's good to categorize genres like Southern rock and progressive rock and punk rock and new wave. But all the bands within those genres are very different, and nobody sounds like television. Produced by Andy Johns, I believe. And it's kind of a low-key production. I know, in my opinion, if I was a producer, I would have made it a bigger sounding album. I think it's a little bit low-key, more low-key. I know, like in the opening track, I remember, in See No Evil, there's some really good harmonies. It almost sounds like The Clash, when they sing together. But in the Clash, it would explode out. It would just be a bigger sound when they come out of the harmonies. And on this, it's just low key. If you listen to it, you may know what I mean. But the vocals are different. Sometimes even sounds like early Patti Smith vocals, and even sometimes like David Byrne. You know, an acquired taste. Their second album, Adventure, critically they said not nearly as good as the first. I disagree. In fact, I listened to Adventure easily as much as I listened to Marquee Moon, and this may be an easier listen. I find that Verlaine's vocals are not as shrill on this album. The production's a little bit warmer. This one is like very crisp and dry. This one, the production's a little bit warmer. And the songs are great. I think the songs are just as good as on the album Marquee Moon. Foxhole is an earlier track. That's a great song. Listen to Carried Away. I think Carried Away is the prettiest, best song they have in their discography out of these two classic albums. So really good. Highly recommended. Both of them, Television, Adventure, and Marquee Moon. They did reform around 92, and they released a self-titled album, Television, and it was a fine release too. I don't think it's up to these two, but it's fine. It was a good release. It's the original band, so it's nice when an original band reforms with the same four guys. And I think even MTV, I remember Call Mr. Lee, I think was a fairly popular track from this album. It's been a while since I heard this one as well. But I'm going to be throwing Marquee Moon on and Adventure tonight, and I recommend you do the same. And don't shortchange this album. I'm telling you, in my opinion, I think it's as good as Marquee Moon. And listen to a punk band that plays extended tracks, really fine guitar work, really fine. They two guitar players, so they kind of feed off of each other, and it's nice. They don't shred, they don't play fast. Most of the solos are single note type solos, but it works. And even the last song on Marquee Moon is Torn Curtain. Reminds me of like what you'd find like in an early Patti Smith album. Good stuff. So sorry to hear about the loss of Tom Verlaine. He had a ton of solo records as well. But the classic discography, of course, is these three from Television. And let's go listen to some Television. And remember, Tom Verlaine, another sad loss in the world of rock and roll. Thanks for tuning in to the Alan Rosenberg Show. I'm going to go play with Wishbone a little bit, and then I'll be back. I'm going to do another video in a little bit. Have a great night.